Recording in progress.
Colleagues, if you could take your seats, please. I'm going to recognize Councilor Lipoff to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Thank you, colleagues. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Newton City Council, but we are meeting earlier than our usual start time because we are going to be joined by the mayor and the chief financial officer of the city this evening, who are going to provide the mayor's annual budget update. Online, I have Councilors Grossman, Wright, Gentile, and Greenberg. I think that covers everybody. Oh, and Baker is not on yet and may join us. Otherwise, we have a full complement of councilors. Please be advised that this meeting is being both audio taped and videotaped. And we're going to start first call. Just to give you a quick preview of the evening, we're going to go through the first call items. We're then going to ask for a suspension of the rules to have the host committee bring the mayor, escort the mayor and Ms. Lemieux in. We'll invite any members of the school committee who are here tonight to sit within the rail if they'd so like. The mayor will give her budget presentation along with Ms. Lemieux. We'll escort them out from the chamber. We'll take a couple-minute recess. We'll go to our items on second call. So with that, Chair Kelly for the Land Use Committee, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Land Use Committee was very busy in April. In your packets on page 77, we met on April 8th, and we took up item number 75-25, which was a request to allow a marijuana transporter at 16 McGuire Court. That was approved 7-0. In the following page, 78, item 76-25, which was a request to amend special permit number 419-22 to allow a 3-story structure at 148 Auburndale Ave. That was approved 7-0. Item 77-25, which was a request to extend FAR at 71 Ave, also approved 7-0. Now, number 422-24, a request to allow 4 attached single-family dwellings with dimensional and parking waivers at 640 Watertown Street was approved 6-1. Number 69-25, a request to allow 4 single-family attached dwellings at 75 Prescott Street, approved 7-0. We then also met again on April 15th, which was just to take up one item, number 7-25.
That item's on second call, madam.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
Thank you. It is. May I thank you for reminding me? Yes, it is on second call. May I request some public hearings?
Go ahead, please, Madam Chair.
I'd like to assign some public hearings for items number 111-125, numbers 124-25, numbers 125-25, and numbers 126-25 on page 85 for May 6th, and item 127-25 and 128-25 also for May 6th.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, I have Vice Chair Oliver for the Zoning and Planning Committee, please.
Thank you, sir. The report begins on page 79. Zoning and Planning Committee met on the 14th of April. We have a number of items that are held. There are 3 appointments that I would like to report out tonight. They're items 70-25, appointment of David Hedison to the Birdo Advisory Commission, which was approved 7-0. Item number 7225, the appointment of Mark Clay to the Birdo Advisory Commission, also approved 7-0. Item number 74-25, the appointment of Dante Capasso to the Birdo Advisory Commission. All other items were either held or on second call tonight. And before I go to the suspension of the rules for a late filed item, I do want just to call out briefly one item for the benefit of all counselors and the public, that on May 28th, there is currently scheduled the first conversation, at the city council, a joint session of both ZAP and public facilities to talk about Birdo for small residential. This is a discussion item only. There is no language in the docket item to begin discussing an ordinance yet. This is only for discussion. But I just wanted to mention that. Thank you for indulging. I do need to request the suspension of the rules for a late filed
All
item.
in favor of suspending the rules to allow a late filed item, please say aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. That item can be found on page 92. It is item 12925, request for authorization to submit the FY26 to 30 consolidated plan, the 2025 revised citizen participation plan, and the FY26 annual action plan. Thank you. And with that, that's all I've got.
Thank you, Vice Chair Oliver. Programs and Services Committee Chair Krinsman, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. The report begins on page 81. Programs and Services Committee met on April 9th. Item 47-25, the appointment of Rabbi Keith Stern as a Newton Library trustee was approved by a vote of 7-0. Item 55-25, a resolution to recognize the Newton Cultural Council was approved by a vote of 7-0. Item 71-25, this is a recommendation to approve the 2025 preliminary election date of September 9th, 2025. That was approved by a vote of 7-0. And item 79-25, the appointment of Michelle Howard Sparks to the Institutional Biosafety Committee was also approved by a vote of 7-0. Last item was held, and I would move the report.
Thank you, Chair Krinsman. Chair Grossman for Public Safety and Transportation.
Thank you, Mr. President. There's no report this evening.
Thank you, Chair Grossman. Next, Public Facilities, Chair Albright.
Thank you, Mr. President. The report is on page 82. And we had it was item 214-24. We had a comprehensive presentation on the network, the Transportation Network Improvement Plan. And we voted that no action necessary on our part. Of course, there's action necessary on the part of DPW. No action necessary, 6-0.
Thank you, Chair Albright. Next, I have the Finance Committee, Chair Gentile.
Thank you, Mr. President. Finance report begins on page 83. There are 3 items to report out. The first is 84-25 for honor the mayor, requesting authorization to accept and expend a gift of $59,400 from the Angel Elementary School PTO for the purchase and installation of a playground, swing set, and other playground improvements. It was approved by a vote of 6-0. Second item is 85-25 for honor the mayor, requesting authorization to appropriate and expend the sum of $28,763 from June 30th, 24 certified free cash for legal settlements to pay a veterans benefit settlement case, which in fact we will be reimbursed by the state. And the last item was 88-25, the comptroller transmitting the annual comprehensive financial report and external audit reports to the city council for review and acceptance. And the finance committee accepted the item by a vote of 6-0. There are a number of late file items on the docket going forward. There are 4 items that I am going to ask for a suspension of the rules, to accept. And I want to make it clear that the 4 items and the rest of the items will stay on the docket and be docketed for referral at the next meeting. The first item is,
You need a suspension of the rules, Chair Gentile. All in favor of suspending the rules?
Mr. President, Mr. President, normally people want to know what they're being asked.
You can go ahead, please, Chair
So
Gentile.
Let me just, I just want to make sure people know what I'm asking to suspend the rules on. The first item is 103-25, which is to create a Department of Sustainability. Well, first, it's the mayor is requesting an amendment to Chapter 2 of the Newton ordinances to create a Department of Sustainability. That'd be one item. The second item is 107-25, which is the mayor requesting $2 million from FY24 free cash to supplement the significant increase in FY26 health insurance. And that is both school health and school employee health insurance and city employee health insurance. The third item is 114-25, which is the mayor requesting $1,170,612 from the FY24 free cash to reduce one-time expenditures for the Newton Public Schools. And then the fourth item is 123-25, which is the mayor requesting $2,525,000 from, again, FY24 free cash for the purpose of completing a list of school facility projects throughout the district. And so I will request suspension of the rules to accept those 4 items.
All in favor of suspending the rules, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The items are accepted on our docket.
All right, I would move the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Gentile. Finally, Chair Danberg for real property reuse.
Thank you, Mr. President. There's no report.
Thank you, Chair Danberg. Vice President Kalis, will you join me on the podium, please? Ms. Moore, will you be kind enough to join us as well? So, as we all know, our city clerk, Carol Moore, is leaving us at the end of this month. We are exceptionally grateful for her service, which has been truly outstanding. We have a commendation for her and then a small gift. So let me start with the commendation. I'll turn it over to Councilor Kalis then. City Council commendation honoring Carol Moore for outstanding accomplishments during her time as city clerk, clerk of the council. Whereas Carol Moore began serving as the city clerk, clerk of the council for the city of Newton in October 2021, bringing with her valuable experience from her prior role as city clerk in Mucalito, Washington. And whereas Ms. Moore has been an invaluable resource to the city council, supporting councilors by expertly managing council meetings and conducting thorough research to inform critical decisions. And
whereas Ms. Moore played a key role in modernizing the technology used by the city clerk's office, including overseeing the transition of permits and licenses to the OpenGov platform and initiating the procurement of a new software system to manage the city ordinances. And whereas Ms. Moore successfully reorganized the city clerk's office, creating a structure that empowers staff for long-term success, she has worked tirelessly to support her team, offering training and professional development opportunities that have contributed to their growth and success.
whereas Ms. Moore's dedication to public service is unmatched, she has remained consistently accessible to the residents of Newton and overseen fair and impartial electoral processes. Now therefore be it known that in recognition of Carol Moore's exceptional achievements and service as city clerk, clerk of the council, the Honorable City Council extends its heartfelt appreciation and gratitude. We thank Ms. Moore for her dedication and wish her continued success in all her future endeavors. Resolution offered this 22nd day of April on behalf of the Newton City Council and the City of Newton by President Mark Laredo, Vice President David Kalis, and President Emeritus R. Lyle Baker. Thank you very much. You're welcome. I'll do it again. Would you care to say a few words? Sure.
Oh, no speech here. I just want to say thank you so much for my experiences here in Newton. And it's been an honor to serve the city and to see such passionate people spend so much of their unpaid time to be here. I mean, it really, local government is really where it starts, and it's really where people feel the most impact on their day-to-day lives. And so I just want to tell you, as somebody that's never going to be in that arena, it's been wonderful to see everyone's actions and time and effort. So thank you very much.
All right. I am going to ask Counselor Downs, joined by Counselor Danberg and Humphrey, to escort the mayor into the chamber along with Ms. Lemieux. We got to call. I'm too eager tonight, folks. Back. Ms. Moore, this is why I'm going to miss Ms. Moore, because she keeps me on the straight and narrow. We'll call the roll, and then we'll get the mayor.
Okay. Make sure everyone's there. Counselor Albright.
Aye.
Counselor Baker. Counselor Bixby.
Aye.
Counselor Block.
I accept item 422-24, in which I vote no.
Counselor Danberg.
Aye.
Counselor Downs.
Aye.
Counselor Farrell.
Aye.
Counselor Gentile.
Aye.
Counselor Getz.
Aye.
Counselor Greenberg.
Aye.
Counselor Grossman.
Aye.
Counselor Humphrey.
Aye.
Counselor Kalis.
Aye.
Counselor Kelly.
Aye.
Counselor Krinsman.
Aye.
Counselor Leary.
Aye.
Counselor Lipoff.
Aye.
Counselor Lobovitz.
Aye.
Counselor Lucas.
Aye.
Counselor Maliki.
I, with the exception of item number 63-25, which I vote no.
63-25, correct? Counselor Mickley.
Aye.
Counselor Oliver.
Aye.
Counselor Wright.
Aye.
President Laredo.
Aye.
Motion carries 23 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent, with the exception of item. Oh, is he on? I'm sorry. Counselor Baker. Counselor Baker? Might be listening. Okay.
That's fine.
Oh, was that him?
Didn't count him.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Counselor Baker.
All right. Your votes counted, Counselor Baker. Last minute, but counted nevertheless. All right. You want to,
Let's do that. I'm good here.
please.
So motion carries 24 yeas, with the exception of item 422-24, for which the vote was 23 yeas and 1 nay. And item 63-25 with the vote 23 yeas, 1 nay.
That's on second call.
Did I say it was 6? Is that correct, Counselor Malik?
Right, I had not caught that one was added to second call. Apologies.
Strike that last vote.
We good otherwise? All right. Thank you. I'll note for the record that Counselor Baker has joined us online. Counselor Wright is now in the chamber. Now it's time for the escort committee to go get the mayor. Please do. Counselors, you can stretch your legs, but don't go far, please. The mayor will be right in.
Mr. President, I'm having technical problems. Did you get me counted in the last vote?
We did count you, Counselor Baker.
Thank you.
Before we begin, we have at least one school committee member here. Do you wish to step inside the rail? You're fine. It's probably safer back there anyways. All right.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening for the City of Newton budget presentation for fiscal year 2026. I'm very glad to be here in the chambers, joining our city councilors led by President Mark Laredo, Vice President David Kalis, and I believe online both President Emeritus Lyle Baker and Finance Chair Lenny Gentile. A special warm hello to school committee member Alicia Petalou, who was elected just a few weeks ago, elected citywide representing Ward 7, and may be one of the few parents who didn't go away for vacation. So we're particularly glad to have you here today. I thank all of our department heads, our CFO, Maureen Lemieux, our COO, Jonathan Yo, and our financial services team led by Perry Rosenfield. All of them have put so much effort into developing this budget. As mayor, I have worked in challenging economic circumstances to provide for the needs of our residents, students, and businesses. Simultaneously, I have taken seriously my responsibility as the steward of the City of Newton's financial health. Through a difficult pandemic and the shutdown of the economy, as well as during increases in unemployment and inflation, we, the city, remained stable. We continued to invest and move forward. We stayed rock solid financially. Tonight, I present this $623 million City of Newton budget at another precarious moment. Cold economic winds are blowing in for the city, our school district, our residents, and our businesses. We face enormous economic uncertainty, and on some days, even financial chaos. The chair of the Federal Reserve is increasingly concerned about higher inflation, increasing unemployment, volatility in the stock and bond markets, higher borrowing costs, a recession, and even stagflation. Our two largest employers in Newton, Boston College and Newton Wellesley Hospital, are in unsettled sectors of the economy. A broad swath of Newtonians are part of those higher education and healthcare sectors, and also in life sciences and research, all of which are threatened with the loss of billions of dollars of federal funding. Newton's retailers and restaurants are facing higher cost of goods, labor shortages, and customers watching their wallets. Our commercial, manufacturing, and office markets are still recovering from the challenges of the pandemic and are now grappling with the implications of higher tariffs. All of us are struggling with high costs, from health insurance to groceries. For those of us at City Hall and the Ed Center, we are dealing with spikes in prices. Out-of-district tuitions jumping 14% last year, health insurance increasing by 11.2% this coming year, and road construction costs escalating from $30 per square yard when I started as mayor in 2018 to $90 today. We are legitimately concerned that DOGE and President Trump will keep cutting funding for the work we do on behalf of students and residents. Newton has more limited exposure than some municipalities and school districts, with approximately $10 million in direct federal funding, but that's meaningful. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts is much more heavily exposed, with approximately 25% of its budget coming directly from Washington, D.C. Newton received approximately $50 million from the state this fiscal year, or about 10% of our operating budget. So we're watching the Massachusetts State House revenue collections, federal funding, and budget deliberations closely. We know how to budget and manage in the face of challenges. When the pandemic engulfed us in 2020, we pivoted quickly, rewrote our budget, and preserved core essential services. We have carefully nurtured our financial health and maintained the highest bond rating possible from Moody's, a AAA. Why? First, a AAA bond rating provides the lowest possible borrowing costs, which saves our taxpayers money. Second, the gap in borrowing costs between AAA and AA increases in times of economic certainty and increases particularly for longer borrowing terms. And we will continue to be selling bonds for our 4 major school projects and a building for our older adults, which are all likely to be 30-year bonds. Third, a AAA rating encourages more bidders and thus lower rates, and provides better access to funding if the economy freezes up. Fourth, meeting the standards of a AAA rating keeps us on the straight and narrow financially, so we aren't tempted to raid one-time funds or ignore long-term liabilities. With this backdrop and a siren behind us, and with an eye to the future, the budget I am proposing is responsible and realistic. The budget is also balanced in 2 respects. First, by state law, we cannot have a deficit, so revenues match expenses. Second, as mayor, I balance the immediate needs of our students with the immediate programs and services our entire community needs. And I balance our overall immediate needs with longer-term investments in capital assets and unfunded retiree obligations. For way too long, the city ignored its capital assets and retiree liabilities. So now we are gradually digging ourselves out of the holes previous decision makers left for us. as I deliver my 8th and final City of Newton budget, I do so knowing that the City of Newton is strong financially and that we can count on steady and predictable growth, allowing us to provide steady and predictable growth in school and city operations. The growth in revenues will continue to be modest. Thus, the growth in our services must be modest. In inflationary periods, we need to be extraordinarily careful with adding new employees and growing initiatives, because when costs are rising faster than our revenues, to provide even level services requires belt tightening. The fiscal year 2026 general fund operating budget I present tonight totals $547.6 million, an increase of $22 million or 4.2%. Enterprise funds for water, sewer, and stormwater combined for $70.9 million, and community preservation funds total $5.1 million. Altogether, next year, the city will operate with just shy of $623 million in funding. This budget provides much for the Newton Public Schools. $292.96 million, an increase of $10.3 million, or 3.65% for the NPS operating budget. $22.6 million, an increase of $2.2 million, or 10.5% for school building debt service payments. $10.5 million, an increase of $795,000 or 8.2%, and $7.2 million, an increase of $533,000 or 8.1% for an NPS pension and NPS other post-employment benefits, i.e. retiree health care, respectively, for Newton Public School employees, and $4.1 million, an increase of $573,000 or 16.1% for the cost of salaries and benefits for school nurses and school crossing guards embedded in city departments. If you were adding it up, the total of just those 5 NPS spending categories exceeds $337 million, an increase of more than $14.3 million, or 4.44%. In fact, altogether, there is approximately $44 million in spending for the Newton Public Schools picked up by city departments. FY 2026 city-side department expenditures for police and fire, public works, public buildings, parks, recreation, and culture, and more, net of those school nurses and school crossing guards, will total $159.1 million, an increase of $5.2 million or 3.4%. $6.2 million for debt service for city facilities, an increase of $100,000 or 1.5%. And $44.7 million for pensions and retiree health insurance for city employees, an increase of $2.5 million or 5.9%. Combined, the FY 2026 city-side expenditures will total $213.5 million, an increase of $7.9 million or 3.86%. I prioritized the Newton Public Schools. Last summer and again last fall, I let Superintendent Nolan and her team know that they could plan on a 3.5% increase in their base allocation and a 3.5% increase from the NPS Educational Stabilization Fund. In January, after some hard work on the budgets for the municipal departments, I was glad I could let them know we could increase the NPS budget by 3.65%. The amount I allocated to the schools for FY 2026, $292.9 million, with that increase of 3.65%, is $10.3 million more than last year. And just as a reminder, although we are providing this allocation, the mayor does not determine how the funding or the monies from the NPS Educational Stabilization Fund will be used. I did determine that the municipal side of the city budget, not including debt service and retirement-related funds, would work with a smaller overall increase of 3.6%. Again, funding for the Newton Public Schools is prioritized, as it should be. And I want to take this opportunity to thank the City Council for its continued and steadfast support of the Newton Public Schools. Let me put this increase of 3.65% in the NPS operating budget for next year into the context of Newton's finances. First point, due to Proposition 2.5, Newton's increase in its property tax levy is capped at 2.5%, plus revenues from new growth, such as new construction or home improvement projects. As a result, Newton's revenues have risen modestly, on average 3.5% to 3.75%. If you strip out, as you should strip out, unreliable, sporadic, or dedicated funding, such as federal pandemic ARPA monies, unusual legal settlements, or voter-approved debt exclusion revenues for school buildings such as Countryside and Franklin. Second point, over 65% of Newton's total budget is spent on our public schools. The remaining 35% pays for all our other needs: police, fire, roads, parks, services for older adults, human services, public health, the library, the debt service on all our new buildings, retiree benefits, and more. I just want to correct something from last Thursday night, just quickly. As a reference point, Brookline spends 58% on their school system. We're at 65%, not the 86% that NPS accidentally represented a few days ago. Third point, Newton is not allowed under state law to run a deficit. So what does this mean? It means that if the school budget rises significantly beyond 3.5% a year in a cost category that is over 65% of our city spending, then we are cannibalizing all the other vital public services on which our residents rely. Notably, a 3.65% increase for the Newton Public Schools this year is a similar increase to other school districts in municipalities that have modest new growth in revenues. We're at 3.65%. Boston Public Schools 3.5%. Watertown, 3.7%. Wellesley, 3.25%. Brookline, 3.5%. In communities where overrides have passed or they have substantial new growth in revenues from new development, they can have larger percent increases. We are also supporting NPS financially with one-time funds if and when the uses are within financial guidelines. Working closely with NPS leadership on the selection, we are providing $1.17 million in free cash for costs that meet the criteria and directly support the NPS operating budget. We are providing another $1.3 million in free cash to address yet another surge in health insurance costs that came as a surprise to all of us and too late in the budget cycle to be inserted into either the NPS or the city-side budgets. We are providing $2.5 million of free cash for priority school facility maintenance projects identified by the Newton Public Schools. While NPS would prefer that the $2.5 million be used for staffing, that particular use is not within the financial guidelines. Thankfully, replacing roofs, upgrading bathrooms, and improving heating, ventilation, and air conditioning improves, yes, the learning environment, and also relieves pressure on the NPS maintenance budget, which is underwater too much of the time. Let me add more about the modest growth in the City of Newton's revenues. I mentioned a minute ago that the City of Newton's revenues grow modestly due to Prop 2.5. They also grow modestly because we are largely a fully built out bedroom community with little land for new development. Additionally, revenues grow modestly as the City Council is super careful about approving new developments, whether commercial or residential. New developments generally do create new revenue. Finally, our revenues also grow modestly unless our voters choose to increase taxes beyond the limits of Prop 2.5. Only twice have Newtonians voted yes for an operating override. I willingly put my political capital on the line in the spring of 2023 to ask for that permission. But we voted no as a community on a Prop 2.5 operating override. We live in a democracy, or can I say we still live in a democracy, and votes count. We must operate within our means, just like our residents. Tonight, we are bringing forward a responsible budget on the city side with many line items level funded, even though every one of our department heads could use additional funding effectively. When we could, we increased ever so slightly key areas that have been burdened by inflationary pressures, such as paving, traffic calming, building maintenance, as well as field and playground maintenance. We move forward in FY 2026 with only one major initiative that we have planned for financially for many years: more support for our older adults. This is long overdue. We have roughly the same number of residents who are under 18 and are 65 and older. In this budget, we will spend $293 million on our school system. All in, we will fund our older adult services department and operate the Cooper Center for Active Living for less than $2 million. We are also bringing to the City Council with this budget a new standalone Department of Sustainability, which includes only one new position. By bringing employees together in one department, we will be more efficient, more effective, and focus further our sustainability efforts. In this budget, we also add one person in our information technology department to increase our focus on cybersecurity as the threats keep expanding exponentially. I also want to take a moment to say a fond farewell and a heartfelt thank you to Joe Mulvey, our Chief Information Officer, a son of Newton, and a person who has served this city for 33 years. He has brought to us a deep understanding of the many facets of the ever-changing municipal information technology environment and a willingness to not only go the extra mile, but to go the extra 26.2. We will miss you, Joe, when you retire in early July. And I am pleased to announce that a person sitting there in the back row that I will docket shortly for the City Council's approval, Deputy Director Greg Ansaldi, to be Newton's new Director of IT. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Greg. Both of you. Chief George McMains and Chief Greg Gentile, with our well-trained police officers and firefighters, will continue to answer calls that range from the routine to the unimaginable. Commissioner Shauna Sullivan and our DPW team will pave 152 small residential roads this season, clear snow and ice, and make sure our yard waste, trash, and recycling are picked up at our curbs, and do more. Parks, Recreation, and Culture Commissioner Nicole Banks and her team are opening the new Gath pools for the second season and a new splash park in Upper Falls. I see some folks from Northland here. I just want to say thank you to Northland because they are building it and then handing it over to us. Parks, Rec, and Culture, it will also be overseeing vast improvements at Albemarle, including our 4th synthetic turf field, and they are digging our 2nd community garden. Director Jill Mercurio, librarians and staff will continue to keep our first-class, heavily used Newton Free Library with its new children's room vibrant 7 days a week. Planning Director Barney Heath and the planning team are concentrating on the Newton Center and Washington Street pilots and continuing to review and assist this City Council on new development proposals. Commissioner of Inspectional Services, Anthony Ciccarello, and the ISD staff will make sure that builders adhere to state laws and the latest Newton ordinances. Transportation Director Ned Codd and Transportation Planner Jen Martin are working on everything from traffic to bike to pedestrian safety, the MBTA's upgrade to the Newtonville commuter rail station, and the restoration of the Comm Ave carriageway in Auburndale. Commissioner of Public Buildings Josh Morse and his team is overseeing the construction of, yes, 3 new elementary schools, Lincoln Elliott, Countryside, and Franklin, and the addition at Horace Mann, as well as the completion of the Cooper Center for Active Living even as they maintain our many city and school buildings. Health and Human Services Commissioner Xinyi Lau and her team is supporting all our school nurses, linking Newtonians to social services, inspecting our restaurants, and so much more. City Solicitor Ali Giuliani, Assessor Jim Shaughnessy, Treasurer Ron Mendez, Chief Procurement Officer Nick Reed, Human Resources Director Michelle Pizzi O'Brien, Comptroller Steve Curley, Historic Newton Director Lisa Dady, and Director of Veteran Services Seth Bai are leading departments that are doing so much important work and doing it well. And we say a grateful and fond farewell to not just Joe Mulvey, but also Carol Moore. That was a lovely commendation, President and Vice President. Carol, you've been an effective and forward-looking city clerk who, among many things, guided us into the future of voting by mail. You have my gratitude, respect, and affection. To Carol. All of this good city-side work is taking place using just 35% of the city's total budget. This budget I present tonight is responsible. This budget is balanced. This budget is almost exactly what we predicted it to be a year ago. This budget reflects a larger increase for MPS than we told them to plan for, and a larger increase for MPS than the city-side departments. This budget is super tight for both municipal departments and the schools. This budget does less than we would like because inflation is outpacing the city's growth in revenues. This budget avoids a financial crisis in the future by preserving the Rainy Day Stabilization Fund entirely, responsibly using the MPS Education Stabilization Fund I established, and appropriately using one-time funds, including free cash, for one-time needs as much as possible. This budget continues to address gradually retiree liabilities over 30 years. This budget supports the debt service to fund important capital investments. This budget balances the immediate needs of our students and residents while maintaining the city's fiscal health for next year and beyond. We will now turn to the more technical part of this budget presentation. I am grateful that the City of Newton's very capable Chief Financial Officer, Maureen Lemieux, has for 15 years worked first with Mayor Warren and then with me so that the city has budgeted both revenues and expenses accurately, moved us forward in good times and bad, avoided layoffs on the municipal side during a pandemic, the shutdown of the economy, and inflationary years by staffing leanly, prioritized education while providing the other critical services our residents and businesses depend on, kept the city strong financially, invested continuously in school buildings and capital assets, made progress in paying down $1 billion in unfunded retiree liabilities, created and then used one-time funds and reserves appropriately, balanced our budget annually, found equilibrium among our many competing needs from public schools to public safety, public works to public health, parks, recreation and culture, human services, the library to older adult services, and from debt service for capital investments to funding liabilities for retiree benefits, and all the while provided in-depth information continuously and full transparency on our financial challenges. I'm going to hand it over to Chief Financial Officer Maureen Lemieux.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor Fuller. Good evening to President Laredo, Vice President Kalis, President Emeritus Baker, who I believe is online, Finance Chair Lenny Gentile, who I also believe is online, all of you counselors here in the chamber, any other counselors who may be online, as well as our school committee member who's here with us. I am pleased to be here this evening. The mayor has certainly spoken about many of the normal things that you would expect to hear in a budget address. What we decided this evening is that I would not bore you with some of our typical details that you will be spending your next month reviewing with all the department heads and as we work our way through the budget. There are certain items that, of course, have been in the forefront during the past few weeks that are really what I want to touch upon and make sure that everybody is entering into this budget process with a level playing field, if you will, of what the facts are and what our challenges are as we move forward. And so this evening, what I would like to cover is to chat for a minute or two about the financial best practices that we need to follow, to talk again for a minute about our Moody's AAA bond rating, our revenues. How do we budget our revenues? How accurate are we when we budget our revenues? Interest income, free cash, commitment to NPS, the FY26 NPS appropriation, the NPS stabilization fund, the NPS multi-year forecast, and then other major challenges ahead of us. Now, I'm just going to say to you, this is the first time that I'm doing the presentation this way with our new screen. Oh, I do have it. Okay, thank you. I didn't think I had any way of seeing what I was saying, so I actually printed this out. So to talk about best practices, we'll start there. We work very, very hard to make all of our financial decisions in the best interest of the city, making sure that we follow best practices. Some of the things that are important to us are recommendations from the Division of Local Services, their Financial Management Resource Bureau. What are some of the things that we need to do when we're putting a budget together or a forecast together? We need to establish target balances for our stabilization funds, our annual free cash, and our other reserves. We set schedules of appropriations to or from the stabilization funds and limitations on how we use our free cash. We restrict the use of unexpected non-recurring revenues or surplus revenues to one-time uses, and we try to restrict the use of stabilization funds to non-recurring expenditures. We also, years ago, back in 2011, when Mayor Fuller was then Alderman Fuller, when I was fairly new here, in the city of Newton, a year after I started, and when Councilor Gentile was chair of budget, we worked with then Comptroller David Wilkinson and amended our financial management guidelines. Those guidelines were presented to the then Board of Aldermen back in 2011, where they were voted on and accepted and have stood the test of time for the past 14 years. One of the most important things in our financial management guidelines, and there are many, but one of the things that we do is that we've stated that we never want to estimate or budget revenues at more than 99% of what we expect. One of the worst things we can do as a city is to budget revenues that don't materialize. We also make sure that we try to budget our expenditures, though, at 100%. So every position that you see on our side of the budget, except for the new positions that will be at the Cooper Center, because we won't be opening until the fall. Otherwise, every position in our personnel detail is budgeted for the full year. We expect when we fund a position that even if someone leaves during the course of the year, that that position is important and that we need to fill that position as soon as possible. And so we budget at 100% for everything, which certainly leaves sometimes a little bit of leftover money. But we stick to that because it's important. Our Moody's AAA rating. There has certainly been a lot of talk about our Moody's rating lately. Our Moody's rating, our AAA rating, is something that has been, the city of Newton has had for many years. Before I got here, the city of Newton was rated AAA. It's important to the people of this community. It's incredibly important to us as an administration. And so what did Moody's say this year when they re-rated us? Every year we do a call that takes a few hours as they ask us all kinds of questions. They considered our strengths to be the strong economy here in Massachusetts, and particularly here in the city of Newton, where residents have high income and wealth. The thing that I'm most proud of, it's the first time that they ever referred to it this way, is that we have exceptional fiscal management. They've always said strong fiscal management. They have never said exceptional fiscal management. And so for me personally, that's a tremendous sense of pride. And that we have a history, although not a huge history, but a history nonetheless, of our residents voting to support 2 overrides and now debt exclusions for now what will be 4 schools throughout the city, which is really important. But what are our challenges? And they always do strengths and challenges. Our challenges are revenue raising constraints because of Proposition 2.5. Proposition 2.5 is a revenue cap. And because we have 83% of our revenue comes from property taxes, that means 83% of our budget only increases by 2.5%. And then any new growth that we are able to realize. But again, as the mayor said, we are virtually built out as a city. So new growth here in the city of Newton is a very small number. Another challenge is the above average tax burden for our homeowners. And the third one is, in fact, that we are largely built out. Our rating outlook, though, is strong. Things that could lead to an upgrade. Well, luckily, there aren't any, because the AAA rating is the highest rating you can have. So there are no items that they would cite there. However, they certainly talk about items that could cause us to see a downgrade. One would be a decline in our available reserves. One would be if our fixed cost ratios increase to more than 20% of our revenues. And the third would be if our leverage ratio, so our bonding ratio, increased to more than 350% of our revenues. Right now, we stand at about, I think we're at about 202% of our revenues. We are well within our debt cap, service cap. However, these measurements are far more stringent than what the caps are that the state would impose upon us. And so we always have to watch these numbers carefully. So let's start talking about revenues, if we may, for a minute. And how do we do? How do we do budgeting revenues? Most of the slides that I will show you tonight are the term of this administration. And so I'm comparing everything back to, or starting these slides at fiscal 2018, which is the last budget that Mayor Warren put together. So you're really getting a good look at the fuller years and what has happened in these past 8 budgets. You can see from this slide that from fiscal years 18, or if you wanted to start at 19, which was Mayor Fuller's first budget, through fiscal 21, you can see that our revenue budgets were either 1 or 2% within the target where we landed.
In fiscal 22, if you look at the row that's pretty much in the middle, excess revenues, you can see that in fiscal 22, we had $28.6 million worth of excess revenue. But why was that? That's because that's the year that Eversource paid us 10 years worth of property taxes that they had been disputing. We had been setting aside overlay funds for that just in case we lost that case. They paid us $12.4 million that year that they owed us. Actually, more than 8 million, I forget the exact number. More than 8 million was the actual property taxes that were due to us. 4.6 million of that money was interest that they had to pay us for not having paid their tax bills for a decade. That is money that we certainly did not expect to see in fiscal 22. It was absolutely extraordinary. We also had the New Falls development had been on a deferred pilot payment. They actually paid off all of the money that they owed us as well that year. And so those two payments combined totaled $14.6 million. Had those two events not occurred, our revenues would have been about $13.9 million more than our budget. In calendar 22, in March of 22, interest rates were still at 0.25%. When we put our fiscal 23 budget together, we had no reason to believe that they were going to change dramatically. But in March of 22 is when interest rates started going up. And so that had an impact on the last few months of our 2022. But you can see without the payments from New Falls and Eversource, we would have been within 3% of our budget. Fast forward to fiscals 23 and 24. You can see that our revenues significantly exceeded our budget by far more than we typically have here in the city. And so what drove that? Well, as I mentioned, you can keep going. Thank you. In March of 22, the feds expected that they would continue to hold interest rates at very low levels through 23. That's what we prepared our budget with, that information. However, in March of 22, they started increasing the rates to the point where by the end of calendar 22, interest rates were up to between 4.25% and 4.5%. A huge increase all of a sudden. And so what did that mean for us? It meant that by the time we ended fiscal 23, we had $9.5 million worth of interest income. If you take a look at this chart, and this chart actually, 2009 and 2010 are as dire as fiscals 11 and 12 and the other years back then. We had, I believe it was at least 13 years of incredibly low interest rates, with only 1 year in that time frame where we earned more than $2 million in interest income. None of us could have foreseen what was going to happen in beginning in March of 22 and going through fiscal 23 and into 24. However, what we do know is that interest rates are not going to stay where they are. Interest rates have already come down by about a point. A year ago, the target for the feds was 5.25% to 5.5%. They are already down to 4.25% to 4.5%, and expect that by the end of this calendar year, they will be down further. Now, with all of the chaos in the economy over the past couple of months, for anyone who watches and reads what happens at the Fed meetings, they are not sure when they're going to change interest rates. So if they're not sure, we certainly can't be sure. But what we do know is that these, what are tremendously high interest rates right now, will not continue. For those of us, just as an aside, for those of us who bought homes in the early 80s, when we talk about these interest rates as being high, for anyone else who's out there who bought a home back in the early 80s, I know our first house, our interest rate was 12%, and we thought we had a bargain because my sister's house
that she had bought a couple years earlier was at 17%, her interest rate. Our kids, and all of us now, look at these rates of 4, 5, 6, 7% and think that they're astronomical. But some of us have certainly lived through much more dramatic days. What happens to this interest income? Well, it drops to free cash each year. And so knowing that this money drops to free cash, we also, of course, have guidelines and ways that we manage our free cash. And so what is free cash? Free cash is the excess of revenues from any given year, which of course is the interest income that we received, unspent appropriations that we may have, unspent overlay surplus that we may have if any overlay had been declared that year, and unspent free cash from the prior year. To quote the Mass Department of Local Services, Mass DOR says that under sound financial policies, a community should strive to generate free cash in the amount of 5 to 7% of its budget. I will tell you, we budget so tightly here. We believe 5 to 7% is far too much to have dropping to free cash. We never want to budget our revenues so low that we are foregoing providing services throughout the course of the year to end up generating 5 to 7% in free cash. And so what have we generated in free cash? Well, from fiscals 13 to 21, you can see by this chart that we had no more than about 13 to 14 million in free cash in any given year. Why is that important? Because we have a $550 million budget at this point. 3% of a $500 million budget is $15 million. We try not to have more than 3% as free cash at the end of the year. Obviously, because of the items that I just spoke about, between the payment of the Eversource decades worth of property taxes and the tremendous interest income that we received in fiscals 23 and 24, we've had substantially higher free cash than we have had in the entire time that I have been here. And so what drove that free cash? Just once again, in fiscal 22, we had $28.8 million certified as free cash. This at the end of 22, as of June 30th, 2022. The Eversource 10-year payment was $12.4 million. The New Falls payment was $2.2. Had those two things not occurred, we would have had $14 million and we would have been exactly in line with where we were supposed to be. Fast forward to fiscal 23. The thing that's important to know about fiscal 23, although we had $27.9 million worth of free cash certified, $5.4 million was left over from the year before. So in actuality, you can't count free cash twice when we're looking to appropriate it and you're looking to support appropriations throughout the city. So that $5.4 million really doesn't count in 23. And so if you're adding up the free cash that we had that we could do something with, in fiscal 23, it was really $22.5 million that was additional money from free cash. What else drove that? Interest income in 23 was $8.4 million over our budget. And so again, you can see very quickly, if with our $22.5 million, if interest income hadn't spiked the way that it did, again, we would be below our 3%. And in fiscal 24, what happened in fiscal 24? Fiscal 24, we had our largest year of interest income, and interest income was $11.6 million over our budget. All of that is wonderful, but we know that we're not going to be able to count on those interest income numbers for much longer. And we certainly can't build a budget using those numbers, hire people, make commitments ahead of time, recognizing that that will be a declining revenue stream sometime in the near future. So where do we fall? Going back to when I said a few minutes ago, DOR recommends that everyone has between 5 and 7% for free cash. You can see that the city of Newton, there's only been 1 year in the last 12 or 13 years that we even had 5%, never mind going anywhere near 7%. So what did we do with all that free cash? One of the most important things that we did was we transformed our free cash, which was one-time money, into ongoing funds for us to be able to use to provide the services that we so desperately need the budgets for. So we took $17.8 million and paid cash toward the Lincoln Elliott project and the Cooper Center, so that we could lower our projected debt service payments. We expected just those two items alone. We expected to spend over $1 million a year on debt service payments for the next 30 years. By using our free cash to pay some cash toward those projects, we were able to avoid having that $1 million worth of debt service for the next 30 years. We did the same with several NPS projects. And so the turf fields at South, the turf field at North, the roofs at Pierce and Mason Rice, all things that you as a council have voted on and worked in collaboration with us to make sure that we could make all these things happen. So $8.7 million worth of NPS projects, $6.5 million worth of municipal projects. In all, we took $33 million of that combined free cash and we set it aside and we paid for things that we otherwise would have bonded, that were in our bonding forecast. And so we were able to end up with $2.7 million that we have been able to repurpose in our operating budget so that we can bring forward the increases that as we are putting before you tonight in this particular budget. What else did we do? We did a whole bunch of one-time appropriations. We took 5.8 of this money to put it into the stabilization fund, the NPS stabilization fund. The first 3.8 is money that we used when we established the fund. When we established that fund at $22 million, 3.8 of that 22 million was from free cash. And then, of course, this past fall, you all approved another $2 million that we added to that fund, so that the total that we have put into that fund is $24 million, but 5.8 million of it came from free cash. We also did a lot of other incredibly important one-time projects for NPS, $8.1 million worth, more than $2 million worth of curriculum, legal settlements, the bridge grant that you've heard about, lavatory upgrades, PA systems, all kinds of improvements for the schools. We also put $11.5 million towards municipal needs, almost 8.4 million to road paving, and another 3.2 to other important municipal projects. We've put this free cash to very good use here in the city. As a quick note, sorry, I'm the one that got ahead of myself. What are we doing now with the remaining free cash? We have docketed just under $5 million worth of free cash specifically for the Newton Public Schools. 1.3 million will go toward the health insurance increase that you all have heard about in the last week or two. 1.17 million will go toward freeing up the NPS operating budget, different one-time items that it's appropriate to spend free cash on, and then 2.5 million to fund certain facility projects over at Newton Public Schools, including things like flooring, portions of roofing, unit ventilators, accessibility and service, and lavatory upgrades. We also will be docketing almost $4.8 million worth of free cash for municipal needs. 700,000 will go to the municipal side of the health insurance issue, 3 million towards paving, and 1.16 million toward projects throughout our city buildings. Just as an aside, in all those years when we had very little free cash, the Newton Public Schools very seldom received any free cash appropriations because it basically was there to help us pave our roads, help us plow our snow, do other things that we needed to do, because years ago we were not even close to funding 100% of many of the expenditures that we have here on the municipal side. In the last few years, when we've had that tremendous free cash, we have NPS has actually, as you just saw in the whole list, really become the beneficiary of a large portion of it. How do we stock up? How do we stand next to our peers with free cash? So we know that DOR says we should all have between 5 and 7% free cash. When you look at any one of our peers, we are far and away below what they all have. We budget extremely tightly here. And we're actually very proud of it because it means that we're using our money on an annual basis and for ongoing expenditures rather than waiting and trying to use it for free cash. So what does our proposed budget look like? Good. All right. So the proposed budget is $547.6 million. 292.96 will go to the schools. That's a 3.65% increase. The city side of the ledger, if you will have a 3.60% increase. Our debt service will be increasing by 2.2 million, which is an 8.46% increase. And our pensions and municipal retiree health will increase by almost $4 million or 6.78. The total increase in this budget is $22.2 million or 4.23%. But there's another way. We look at it in these 4 categories. We talk about these 4 categories all the time. But there's another crucial way that we need to look at the budget. And that's what NPS specific costs are increasing by. So if we look specifically at NPS, the operating budget at NPS is increasing by that 10.3 million that we've talked about, that you've heard so much about. Strictly NPS debt is going to increase by almost $2.2 million. Nurses and crossing guards, and actually in my numbers, a few of them are lower than the other numbers that you're hearing because I wanted to make sure I pulled numbers that everybody could easily go to our budget book and find, and I didn't want to pull out parts of numbers. So this is actually a little bit lower even than Steve Curley would give you. Nurses and crossing guards increasing by over $400,000. NPS pensions, these are just the NPS people that are part of the city pension system. $10.8 million is what we have in the budget for that. And the NPS OPEB, which I'm sure most of you remember, we took onto the city side a few years ago, will be increasing by 10% or about $300,000. All in, just these few areas, just these 5 areas of NPS expenditures are increasing by more than $14 million or just about 4.4%. In addition to this, what I haven't even pulled out are our school resource officers that are carried in the police department. The water and sewer charges for all NPS buildings is carried in the public buildings department. We have all of the work that we do on parks, fields, playgrounds at the different schools are all on the municipal side of the budget. I haven't even counted those in here. I wanted to make it fairly simple so that everybody could see when we say that we prioritize NPS, we are prioritizing NPS, and I think it's important that people are able to see it. So what have we done over the term of this administration? Using those same categories. The 2018 budget was at $245 million for those same NPS categories. This budget in front of you has $334 million for those categories. It's an $89 million increase over the 8 years of budgets under the Fuller administration. What does it mean by percentage? The total percentage increase over the 8 years is 36%. And the one that's in yellow there, I put it there because even during COVID, the Newton Public Schools were given a 2.86% increase in their budget. What does that mean? 36%? It means that the average annual increase for NPS has been 4.5% over the past 8 years. Now I'd like to just talk about the stabilization fund for a couple of minutes. When the stabilization fund was created, we had lots of conversations about how do we make this fund last for a good amount of time while also doing great things for NPS. We ended up in the 25 budget with a $4.1 million appropriation to Newton Public Schools from the stabilization fund. Last summer, we worked with the school department. Last fall, when we did our forecast, you may recall, we talked about how we were concerned with how NPS in their fiscal 25 multi-year forecast, what they were showing they were going to use as stabilization funds. We believed that this was the right trajectory, that we start at the 4.1 million, which was only $400,000 short of the override that was before the voters in March of 23. And our assumption was that it would increase at the same rate as the budget, the Newton Public Schools budget would increase. When we received the multi-year forecast, in last year's forecast, the fiscal 25 NPS multi-year forecast showed the Newton Public Schools using the money at a faster rate than we had anticipated. So we met with them and talked about it. This year, in the FY26 multi-year forecast, they actually are spending the funds at an even faster rate. And so where the forecast was for their forecast was 5.1 this year, 6.1 next year. In last year's forecast, they had 4.1. This year, in their new forecast, they have 6.3 for the 28 utilization of the stabilization fund. So what does that do? If you look at the trajectory of what we were expecting back when we established the fund, the green line is what our recommendation was. And that was to have a nice steady increase of funding coming out of the stabilization fund. And at that time, when we first put the fund together, we would have run out of funds. And so fiscal 2030, there would have only been about $2 million left in the fund. And so that's why our green line drops down to 2 million, but the schools would have run out of the money at the rate that they were going to use it. Again, fast forward to this year. Now the 26 forecast shows, because we added that $2 million in the fall, we can still have a nice trajectory through fiscal 30 with our recommendation, with the proposal or with their plan in their multi-year forecast. They would still use the money by fiscal 29, and so it would be gone, using obviously more money in each of these next few years than our original expectation. So that's cause for concern, a dialogue that we all need to have. What are the challenges that lie ahead? Well, we have several. The first is the NPS multi-year forecast. The forecast, unfortunately, is unsustainable. Their forecast shows this year, if their budget moved forward at the rate that was submitted to the city council, there would be a $4.5 million gap. Next year's budget, with the projections that they have, shows a $7.6 million gap. The following year is almost 11.4, then 15.3, and then more than $22 million by fiscal 30. But there's more happening than just what shows as the gap and as their deficit. Their utilization of the NPS stabilization fund actually needs to be added to it so that all of us as a group understand what we are using one-time monies for over at Newton Public Schools, and whether or not and when we have a financial cliff if we are going to continue on this trajectory. And so I've used their stabilization numbers because that's what drives the gap numbers that they have. In addition to utilization from their forecast, we also have the issue of the health insurance. That now it's clearly not their fault that the 1.3 million isn't in their budget. We didn't even know about it till well after their budget had been printed. But all of us will have to figure out how we deal with the new increase in health insurance in next year's budget. So it's a $1.3 million issue for the Newton Public Schools that'll grow by a solid 5% each year. So in total, what it means is the budget as proposed by the Newton Public Schools, the $297.5 million budget, has $10.9 million worth of either deficit or one-time funding in it. That number grows to 15 and then 19 and then 22 and then $24 million. Unfortunately, these numbers, when we have stable growth in revenues, these numbers are unsustainable. What else does it mean? If we look at the multi-year forecast and we combine it with where we know that debt service will be going, the nurses, the crossing guards, the pensions, and OPEB, the same numbers that I put in front of you for the other slides, we would be growing by 5.8% in 26, almost 5.9% in 27, and 4.9% in 28. The sad fact of the matter is that we can't have 60 to 65% of our budget growing at these numbers when we have modest revenue increases. And so it's a challenge that we're all going to have to work through. I'm not standing here telling you that I have any one of the answers for it. I'm just pointing out where our challenges are over these next several years. And so clearly NPS multi-year forecast is going to be a challenge for us. Our pensions and OPEB continue to be a challenge. We have worked hard to try to move these numbers forward. Today, hot off the press, we had our actuary in today with the January 1, 2025 valuation for the pensions. We now have a $277.8 million unfunded liability for pensions. And I was sorry to see that we are still only 67.8% funded for our pensions. We have worked so hard to try to get this number up. And it's such a challenge. Our OPEB unfunded liability, we've also worked hard there. And we put several different policies in place that enabled us to lower our OPEB liability. Our liability, which used to be between $700 and $800 million, is now down to $465 million. We have the funded ratio as of June 30th of 2024. It's funded by 7.6%. However, we, of course, know how much money we have in our OPEB trust fund. And so as of the end of February, we are at about 9.3 or 9.4%, still under 10%, very far away from being fully funded, but we've worked hard and we've really made progress in this area. So how do we compare to all of the other pension systems around the state? This chart shows where Newton falls with many of what we consider to be more of our peer communities or communities that surround us. In actuality, there are 105 pension systems across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We are 89th when it comes to being funded. 88 of the 105 municipal pension funds or public employee pension funds across the state of Massachusetts, 88 of them are better funded than we are. Clearly, it's a challenge for us as we move forward. Right now, we have gotten to the point where we at least are putting more money into the pension trust fund than we are taking out. For many years, we were taking out more than we were putting in, and it wasn't until we hit fiscal 22 that we started putting more money in than we were taking out. So at least we turned a corner there. This will remain a challenge. Roads and paving are another challenge that we will be facing. I think the mayor mentioned in her remarks, in 2017, the actual cost per square yard of paving was $30. We are now at a point where when we're planning for what roads we are doing, we plan on $90 a square yard. The projected amount of money that we need, depending on what we want our PCI to be. So our pavement condition index has grown dramatically. Back when we started this plan in 2017, we thought that spending $9.5 to $10 million a year would get us to a point where we would be able to get our roads in good condition. And then we would be on a maintenance of effort. Would still need to spend virtually the same amount of money, but it would be more or less slightly different work. Now, if we want our roads to have even a 73 average pavement index, though not even the top number here, we would need to be spending $14 million a year. Clearly, it's another one of our big challenges. And then the last one that I will leave you with tonight is tremendous regulations have been instituted for stormwater, in particular for phosphorus control for the Charles River. The phosphorus requirements on their face require the city of Newton to spend $142.7 million by fiscal 28 to accomplish what we are supposed to by regulation do with taking phosphorus out of the Charles River. By 2038, the estimate is that it will have cost us $575 million. Clearly, that is completely unrealistic. We are working hard to meet with DEP and EPA and whoever else is in charge of these regulations to see if we can have an alternate funding plan approved. We will be coming to all of you with that over these next few months because we have to submit something. There is absolutely no way that we can ever meet those challenges. But just so I thank you for listening, but just to give you a little bit of a vision into what we will be coming back here to see you with through the rest of the spring, the summer, and into the fall. Thank you.
I just have a few more minutes, I promise. I know we've gone on for a long time. There's a lot to cover. It's nuanced and it matters so much to our parents, our teachers, our residents, and yes, certainly to our city councilors. I do want to say thank you to Maureen Lemieux. You can see the expertise and the heart that she brings to all of this. I first got involved in the life of the city by serving on a blue ribbon commission on the city's revenues outlook. It was 2006. And then as vice chair of the Citizens Advisory Group, which analyzed not only revenues, but expenditures. Flash back to 2009, the Citizens Advisory Group came to these 4 conclusions. The city had modest opportunities to increase revenues. The city had significantly underfunded capital and maintenance. The city had limited opportunities for major cost efficiencies for city-side operations. And 4th, costs were rising faster than the funding on the school side, and NPS had limited opportunities to decrease expenses painlessly. Fast forward to 2026, and much of this is still true. Why? The city's revenues always grow modestly. Our ambitions, and yes, sometimes our needs, grow exponentially. Sometimes we are hurt by inflation. Now, the city continues to have quite a few levers to pull to address these challenges. We have used them in the past. I have used them as mayor in the past. And we will likely need to use quite a few, if not all of them, in the future. I'm going to list 9 here. I'm sure in this room we could even come up with more. Here are the 9 levers for us to consider. First, instituting more efficiencies. For example, we have loved our elementary school neighborhood model with 15 schools today, a decrease from 22 in years past. With declining enrollment, this model may need to continue to be adjusted. Our 2 oldest school buildings that need to be reconstructed are proximate to each other and have the smallest enrollments of all 15 elementary schools. One of them only has enough students to have 1 classroom in 2 of its grade levels. Another example on the city side of an efficiency opportunity is, yes, picking up, let's say, recycling every other week. Second lever, and these are in no particular order. They could be in any order. A second possibility, evaluating continuously outsourcing and insourcing of programs and services for savings and improvements. A third one, deciding whether to reduce the scope and scale of current operations. A fourth one, considering whether to slow down the increase in funding of retiree benefits. We did this 2 years ago to help fund a school project. We could consider it again, but that keeps Newton in the basement on retiree funding level and actually increases the overall costs to Newton's taxpayers. Importantly, the Newton Retirement Board is independent and has full authority over this decision. Fifth one, acknowledging that any new major capital project, from new school buildings to an overhaul of the police headquarters, will require a vote by our residents for a debt exclusion override. So we don't use more operating funds to pay the debt service for new buildings. I've lost track of where I am. Hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th. Sixth, negotiating collective bargaining agreements that maintain parity between revenue growth and growth in compensation and benefits, especially as compensation accounts for 88% of the NPS budget and 75% of the city-side department budgets. Seventh, supporting new housing, houses, condos, and apartments, and new commercial development to increase revenues on an ongoing basis. Eighth, asking voters to consider operating overrides and doing this more regularly, especially in inflationary periods, so that we can preserve services and have smaller operating override requests that may be more acceptable. That is what the town of Arlington does. Arlington's model calls for an operating override every 4 to 5 years, with general government operating budgets growing slightly less than the school budget, while continuously maintaining the town's financial health against future fiscal shocks with a strong bond rating. The ninth one, modifying Proposition 2.5 or increasing options for additional city taxes, but you have to do that by working with the state legislature. So we should think about pulling all 9 of these levers right now and using many of them sooner rather than later. So let me call it close. We in the city of Newton, despite inflation and economic challenges, have proven strategies and a lot of experience in balancing and managing our budget. So we address our three community goals simultaneously. First, moving forward sustainably to make Newton greater, better, and more beautiful. Focusing on excellent schools, first-rate public safety, better and safer streets, sidewalks, and mobility. Providing caring support for those who are struggling. Top-notch services and programs for older residents. Outstanding services for all of us. Beautiful parks and playgrounds and conservation areas. Vibrant villages and proactive actions to address housing, transportation, economic development, and climate resiliency, and continued acceleration of key capital projects. Second, protecting our city's financial health and budgetary flexibility so we can face risks and unpredictable financial conditions, such as a pandemic, economic downturns, inflationary cycles, traumatic weather events, and yes, even the loss of federal or state funding. Third, fulfilling our long-term obligations that we have not yet funded sufficiently. Maureen just showed you. This includes the $740 million of unfunded pensions and retiree healthcare liabilities. I am truly grateful to our residents and our business people. I know passions are high. I am so, Carol said this earlier, that's our superpower. People here care. They're passionate. They speak up, they speak out. They'll be here in standing room only on Thursday night to advocate for teaching and learning. I'm very grateful to our residents. Yes, to all of you, our city councilors, you go through every budget item night after night, not just in budget season, all year round, analyzing the spending, seeing how we're doing, helping us make our decisions. Our school committee members, again, same thing on the school funding side. They care so deeply for each student and making sure that each one of them can thrive. And to our school teachers and our city staff, they're living it every single day. It is amazing. They go above and beyond to support our residents, our children. Yes, yesterday, 30,000 runners came through the city of Newton. We had thousands of spectators. I drove the marathon route this morning, early on. You almost couldn't even find one stray cup. That's our team. Our police department kept us safe. Our fire department made sure ambulances were there. We didn't have too many calls for those who had struggled on the course. Our Parks and Rec and DPW teams were doing all the setup and cleanup. Yep, we've got challenges, certainly in the world. We've got challenges here in Newton. We can do this, and it's hard. We'll figure it out. We're here to support each other, our youngsters, our oldsters, and everybody in between. I truly believe we are privileged to call Newton home, and I know I am privileged to serve as your mayor. So thank you all very, very much.
Will the escort committee please escort the mayor and Ms. Lemieux out of the chamber? We'll take a 2-minute recess while they do so. I know. And that's why I'm summoning you back, Counselor Lucas. So we've added two counselors in person. Counselor Grossman, welcome. Counselor Wright joined us a little while ago. Thank you, by the way, for letting me use your seat during the mayor's presentation. All right, folks, we have several items on second call. Let's see if we can try to move these expeditiously. Do I have everybody back on? Okay, we have two accessory dwelling unit ordinance items which are were held from last time. So I'm going to recognize the chair of the Public Facilities Committee, Councilor Albright, accepted zoning and planning. So I'm going to recognize. I must say, you know, my mind is off tonight. It was a long weekend. What can I say? But I don't see Councilor Oliver back in the chambers. So we're going to take one more minute and get him back here. No, Councilor Albright, you could have handled it very well. We could just move it along, but I think we have to follow protocol. All right, Councilor Oliver, we're duly waiting for you. That's better. I was going to let Councilor Albright report this item out for us, but she decided that the right committee was your committee. We are back on second call. We have two items, the accessory dwelling unit items. I'm going to recognize Vice Chair Oliver for zoning and planning.
Great, thank you, and my apologies. Like I said, 3 minutes was completely unacceptable and then broke my own rule. So we have two items here. We're reading them both, correct?
We are, you could, let's speak to them together if we could, and we
Fair
can
enough.
vote them separately.
Okay, so what we have in front of us was probably the quickest way I could explain it is it started with the state modifying their definition or instituting a definition of ADUs that had to be implemented by right. And in addition to that, we entertained several amendments that went further beyond what the state requirements are to increase their size, both in terms of internal and external ADUs, as well as a lot of the unique elements that Newton had already had in place that governed how ADUs had to be created in terms of their design, the placement of external entrances to the buildings. There were issues about parking. Those are the ones that come to the top of mind for me right now. But what we do have in front of us, right, they are two items so that they can be voted separate so that we can be in compliance with state regs, because currently we are not in compliance. I believe those took place on February the 2nd of this year. So we've been kind of living under state rule for our ADUs for about a little over 2.5 months now. So from that perspective, I know that they are on second call this evening. Happy to answer any other questions that come up, but that's
Any
the
questions
quickest
for
way I
both
can
of the
answer.
president or the vice chair? So is there Councilor Albright?
So I have no questions, but I'm hoping that we could postpone these two matters until a date certain. Unexpectedly, all of us are here tonight, but that was not what we expected to have happen. And as I understand it, Councilor Baker is having a hard time communicating with us. Although he's here, it's hard for him to communicate. I was originally going to ask for the first meeting in May, but we're losing some people for that meeting as well. So I'm asking if we can postpone both of these items until the second meeting in May.
So there's a motion to postpone by Councilor Albright. Is there a second for that motion? Seconded by Councilor Wright. We're going to take both items. Is there any discussion on the motions to postpone to the second full meeting in May? All right. Council Maliki on the motion.
Just wondering, can we vote on each one separately?
We'll vote on each one separately tonight. Yes, Council Lucas.
I understand where you're coming from, where you didn't expect everyone to be here, but everyone is here. I don't know why. I mean, I understand why one would want to postpone any item of importance if not everyone is going to be here. But as I said, everyone is here. We have all 24. So, I mean, you made the motion and it probably will pass, but I am going to vote against it. Thank you.
I'm going to recognize Councilor Albright again as the maker of the motion.
So actually, I spoke to Councilor Oliver about that when by surprise everybody was here. But I think I think Councilor Baker is the one that has the problem in communicating with us. And Councilor Oliver asked that we postpone it. So that's why I did it.
Councilor Baker, your hand is up. I'll recognize you next. Councilor Baker.
Let me see. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now, Councilor
I'm
Baker.
sorry. This is, as you say, I'm traveling and I'm trying to make internet connections work. But I didn't expect to be able to attend, but I am here and I appreciate the effort to postpone. But in some ways, I'd rather not have it held up. I appreciate the thought that the vice chair put in, and that if we're all here, we might as well go ahead and deal with it. But I didn't expect to be able to attend. But if you can hear me and I'm able to participate, I think it would make sense to go ahead and get it done.
We can hear you, Councilor Baker. Councilor Albright, do you want to withdraw your motion?
I absolutely will.
All right,
My motion.
motion's withdrawn. We're back to debate on the main two items. We're going to discuss them together. We're going to vote on them separately. Is there anyone who wishes to be heard on either item? I have
do.
online, I have Councilor Baker wishes to be heard.
Thank you, colleagues. I went through an elaborate discussion of these items at the last meeting to try and clarify the nature of the changes. And we have two items before us and two versions of the clarifications, two versions of the ordinance. One, you may recall, was highlighted in yellow, which is the parens 2 changes that are part of that item. And then the other part is those matters which were compliance with state law. I'll just indicate that I intend to vote for the first item, but I want to indicate my reasons why I cannot vote for the second. I think these changes are basically in the public interest, but the balance is a difficult one to strike, where we're trying to protect the interest of the abutters to properties as well as the interest of the property owner. And that balance is a difficult one to shape. I would have preferred if we had in the second version those items that are not required to have additional protections of owner occupancy, so that would be applied across the board. However, we do have owner occupancy for the as of right new construction, as well as the opportunity for it to be considered as part of the special permit. I didn't vote in committee for the second item because of that deficiency. And that's why I will not vote for the second item tonight. But I do urge my colleagues to vote for the first item and then exercise your judgment about the second. Thank you.
Councilor Baker. Anyone else wish to be heard on either item? All right, seeing no, I'm sorry, Councilor Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. President. I agree with Councilor Baker. I'm going to vote for the first item. I'm going to vote against parens 2. I don't believe parens 2 is necessary right now. I think we should abide by the state law and see what happens with the ADUs. If parens 2 is necessary and we're not seeing the growth of ADUs, then I believe it would be appropriate. But for right now, it's not appropriate. I'm going to vote against it. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councilor Getz, Kalis, Leary.
I will be supporting both items. I had numerous discussions with both planning and the law department, and I'm comfortable with what we voted out of committee.
Thank you, Counselor Getz. Counselor Kalis and then Larry.
Similar to Counselor Getz, I think that we have talked about this in many meetings within the committee. It's not our practice, I think, to discuss, debate, look at it from every angle, and then say it's not necessary. It was necessary when we docketed it. I think it's necessary now. I think the work that was put in is worthy, and I think we should pass both of these together. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Kalis. Counselor Larry.
I'm in complete agreement with the last two speakers. I think we heard loud and clear that we're not making very good progress with ADUs over since the 1980s when it first came up. And particularly, we heard from our residents about these ADUs will support families, people with disabilities, older adults, allow people to stay in their homes. I think we heard loud and clear. I will be supporting both items. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Counselor Larry. Anyone else wish to be heard? Counselors Oliver and then Mickley.
Great, thank you, Mr. President. I will be supporting the first item, but not the second. I agree with Counselor Baker from the perspective of if we are going to go up to 1,500 square feet for an external ADU on any lot in the city, I believe that there should be an owner occupancy requirement on that. That's what these, in my opinion, ADUs were originally intended to do, was provide accessory dwelling units, not additional dwelling units. But from that perspective, thank you very much.
Thank you, Counselor Oliver. Counselor Mickley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I agree with the concerns raised by Councilor Lucas, Councilor Oliver, Councilor Baker. But I actually come to a different conclusion. Obviously support the first one. The second one, ADUs represent sort of diverse source of housing that we just don't really have enough of. If you drive around Newton, you see a lot of large scale apartment buildings, a lot of giant McMansions, and you just don't really see much of that moderate sized housing that, frankly is not affordable, but a little slightly more attainable. And I think it's worth experimenting with a more generous ADU option to see if that brings more of that housing type online. And there definitely are risks and potential consequences that if we see those play out, especially with the impacts on abutters, we can revise the second ADU ordinance later on. So for now, I'd like to see what comes out of it, and hopefully we'd get some projects that meet that missing middle housing supply. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Mickley. Counselor Albright.
Just a quick comment, because I do support both docket items. We currently have in our inclusionary zone, in our ADU ordinance right now, we have a special permit for external ADUs that goes up to 1,500 square feet. And essentially, the new ordinance doesn't change that. You still have to have a special permit, and the requirements are exactly the same. So just to put yourself at ease, to give you the confidence to vote for both items, it's exactly the same as the ordinance we have now.
Thank you, Counselor Albright. Anybody else wish to speak on either items?
Mr. President?
Yes. I'm sorry.
I can't get my hand to work, so that's why
I'm glad you jumped in, Counselor
Okay,
Gentile. Go ahead, please.
I just want to make this observation. I was not involved with this very much at all, so I'm not going to make any motions. But what I don't understand is, personally, I agree with several of the speakers, many of them who worked a lot on this, that the parens 2 would be a better better item if it had an owner occupancy requirement. I just think it adds a protection to the neighbors that they should have. And so I don't understand why somebody who's worked on this a lot and believes that, why they haven't made the motion and see where, you know, an amended motion, if it would pass or fail, because I'd like to vote for it.
Well, there's no motion pending in that regard unless you're looking to make it, Counselor Gentile. Counselor Baker?
So I'm sympathetic to that issue, and Counselor, and I feel handicapped because I'm not able to be there in person and to have language available. And that's my concern. This item requires 13 affirmative votes. And if I thought there were 13 votes in favor of the making the owner occupancy requirement across the board above the threshold required by the state, I would move it. And I guess I would like to hear from any other counselors who support it. I don't think it's worth proposing something if it's not going to succeed by getting a majority of the counselors present. But I do think it's wise policy. And if it doesn't have support among the counselors now, perhaps we can bring it back later, as Councilor Mickley indicated. But I didn't propose it because I'm away, and I was concerned that the item not be delayed, but also I was concerned about its particular character. And if there are other people who feel as Councilor Gentile does, perhaps we could consider such an amendment, but I hadn't proposed one yet for that reason, because I wasn't sure of the support.
Colleagues, yes, Counselor Albright.
I'd like to remind my colleagues that we did, as a compromise measure in zoning and planning, we did recommend and pass owner occupancy for external ADUs between 1,000 and 1,200 square feet. And the rest of it, if it gets larger, it goes to special permit where owner occupancy is suggested but not required. So it's up to the city council if they want it. So this was a compromise place that we came to as a committee.
Thank you, Counselor Albright. Counselor Humphrey.
Just very briefly on this specific point, if some of the counselors have concerns about that, it actually seems like it would be more appropriate to docket an item specifically about the topic of owner occupancy in general, you know, ADUs, but also in other contexts. This is something that does come up and has come before us from time to time. There's certainly within a very short walking distance of my house, there's a single family home that is short-term rented basically all year round. There's a single family home that's just come on the rental market for long-term rental. There's a lot of things that come up in that arena, and it is a particularly complex topic, but I don't really understand why we would be trying to deal with it sort of, I guess, as an accessory to this particular docket item at the last second. If you have concerns, and there are, you know, some understandable concerns, I think it is a complex topic, though. There's always various scenarios that come up in these discussions about, you know, what is the particular need? You know, what if someone goes to a nursing home? What if they pass away? And then what happens to the tenant while things are, you know, in court and, you know, dealing with probate and all those type of things. So if you want to talk about it, I think you should put forward a docket item to specifically talk about it. But it's going to need to be a big picture discussion about the issue in general, not just something that you kind of tack on here. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Humphrey. Anybody else? All right, I don't see anyone online either. I don't see any motions to amend, so we are going to call the roll.
Mr. President.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's me. I don't have a hand to use anyway. Just one, can someone clarify something for me? I believe that I heard in the discussions, and this is a concern that I have, and I think that, which is why I think that owner occupancy is a much needed protection for neighbors. Am I correct in my understanding that, and I think this came from the state, that basically these ADUs only have to meet a 5-foot setback? Am I correct in that?
That's a question from Counselor Gentile through the president to the vice chair. Vice Chair Oliver.
Great, thank you. Yes and no. Kind of footnoting to Counselor Humphrey's comment. It is fairly complicated because there are, if the primary and correct me, anyone on Zap, if I don't get this 100% correct. If the primary structure on the property has a 7.5-foot setback, external ADUs have to be set back 7.5 feet. If there's an existing structure that is going to be modified to contain an ADU that has a 5-foot setback, you have to maintain the 5-foot setback. And here's my first correction. Here we go.
All right, Counselor Wright, if you want to editorialize and maybe perhaps modify the response of the vice chair, go ahead.
It can be 5 feet from the setback if it's built as the size of a accessory structure. So like a garage. So if it meets those dimensions, and I think our garage is 700 square feet footprint and things like that, then it can be 5 feet from the setback. And it also can only be 1.5 stories tall. And if it's going to be bigger or taller, then it has to meet the zoning setbacks for the primary structure.
And perhaps the last word on this topic, Counselor Baker, who's the chair of the committee and our expert on all things zoning. Counselor Baker, can you unmute?
I'm sorry, my apologies, colleagues. This is the difficulty of operating in long range on a phone, but I'm going to make a motion to amend the report from parens 2, so we'll have some clarity about this, but just to indicate what the situation is. We have in the draft that has come forward, if there is something that is built as an external that is going to be 1,200 square feet between the statutory threshold, which is actually 900 to 1,200 square feet. If it's going to be new construction, the owner occupancy requirement exists. If it's going to be a conversion of an existing detached structure, then it is going to be no owner occupancy requirement. And if it's a special permit that can go up to 1,500 square feet, as Councilor Albright indicated, it's a possibility, but not required. And I think it's in the public interest, especially with the external ADUs, because the internal ADUs are going to be self-governed in a sense by the nature of the property. For the external ADUs to be governed by a uniform requirement of having an owner occupancy requirement. So I'm going to move that amendment to see if it has support on the council, because I think it is in the public interest. And if it passes, I'll be glad to vote for item parens 2. Right. But without that, I feel that I cannot vote for it. So let me just see if there's sentiment on the council for it. There is the language that is in the yellow highlighted version that relates to owner occupancy would apply across the board to external ADUs, not just to those which are built in existing structures up to 1,200 square feet. So that would be the nature of the amendment. I talked to a lot of.
So, Counselor Baker, you've proffered an amendment before we have any discussion. Is there a second to the motion to amend? Counselor Oliver has seconded the motion. Discussion solely on the amendment right now. Counselor Maliki.
Yes, I'm happy to support that amendment. I think there is a difference between detached ADUs and other contexts like 2 families or single families that are not owner occupied. Here, it's a case of having basically a second house, albeit a small one, on a property. And I think it affords more protection to abutters to ensure that the person who is renting the property to somebody else.
Could you speak into the microphone, please?
Oh, boy, I thought I was. Okay. I think it affords more protection to the neighbors if the person who is renting out either the accessory unit or the main unit is living on the property themselves to sort of live with whoever is the tenant. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to, hold on. I'm going to take comment on the motion, but I'm just going to suggest we've had a lot of discussion on this. So if you have something new or there's a measure of support for this motion, fine. Otherwise, I'm going to suggest perhaps you limit your commentary. So I have Councilors Albright, Wright, and Kalis in that order.
So I'm not, first I need to make sure I understand the amendment. The amendment is requiring owner occupancy on all ADUs external larger than 900 square feet. Is that what the amendment was?
Counselor Baker, there's a question from Counselor Albright through the president to make sure she has clarification on your proposed amendment. Would you repeat it just for the benefit of Counselor Baker?
No, I want to be clear that, sure. And I want to be clear that the state law requires that we provide for 900 square feet. But what I'm going to suggest, because we're trying to make this consistent in the changes as simple as possible, it's going to be any unit above 1,000 square feet that's an external ADU, because that's the baseline that we have in our current draft ordinance. And I think it
that's already
simplifies that
required.
for.
Is there a question? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Please finish, Counselor Baker.
Yeah, it's required if it's a new unit. If it's a conversion of an existing structure, it is not required. And for special permits, it's optional. It can be considered, but it's not required. Right now, our current ordinance, just so everybody knows, requires owner occupancy for all ADUs. So this would preserve the owner occupancy requirement we currently have for ADUs that are above the state threshold by 100 square feet. In other words, anything above 1,000 square feet that is an external ADU. That's what our current ordinance provides. That we just preserve it for those structures that are external ADUs above 1,000 square feet.
Are you all set, Counselor Albright?
I understand it now. So I hope that folks will not vote for this amendment because it puts an added burden on creating ADUs and who can live there. And as Councillor Humphrey said, I think if folks are concerned about renters in Newton, then it needs to be a docket item where we can talk about our concern for renters in Newton. I, for one, am not afraid of renters in Newton. Some of my best friends are renters in Newton. So I hope people will not vote for this.
Thank you, Counselor Wright, and then Counselor Kalis.
One of the issues that was brought up, having this requirement is if someone would pass away, what happens then? Right now, we have rules on the books for ADUs. I mean, not ADUs, for, I can't remember the name.
Owner occupancy.
Pardon? Airbnb, that's it. And it takes years to shut that down. Years and years, and we're still going after it. If something happens, I mean, I don't see like someone's going to get kicked out or they can't rent it right away. It's a process. So it will take some time. It's not going to be immediate. So having this requirement, I don't think is going to be a big disadvantage to people. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. All right. Anybody else wish to speak on the amendment? Counselor Leary.
I just don't understand the comparison between Airbnbs and ADUs. It doesn't resonate with me at all. So I don't think that's.
Can we do a quick turn down?
Well,
why don't
Anyway,
you don't have to worry about that. We're doing it.
Okay. Do you have these cards that we set?
That's the end of my comment.
all right. I'm gonna recognize Counselor Wright. I do want to avoid a back and forth. Go ahead, please.
The reason I brought it up is the enforcement of, stopping something or changing the regulations. And it takes years. I mean, Councillor Maliki and I are working on a few in our ward to shut them down. And it's not that simple. Even though we have the rules that say you can't do it, it doesn't happen overnight. Thank you.
Is everyone satisfied? Can we, right now, we're going to vote on the amendment. If you vote yes, you're voting in favor of amending the second docket item to add Counselor Baker's language. If you're voting no, you're voting against the amendment, and the original item still passes, is in front of us. Madam Clerk, let's call the roll on the amendment, please. Oh, Counselor Baker?
Aye.
Oh. I'm really ahead of the game tonight. Let's keep at it while I'm going. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Counselor Albright,
No.
Counselor Baker,
Aye, and thank you, colleagues.
Counselor Bixby,
No.
Counselor Block,
Aye.
Counselor Danberg,
No.
Counselor Downs,
No.
Counselor Farrell,
Aye.
Counselor Gentile,
Aye.
Counselor Getz,
Aye.
Counselor Greenberg,
No.
Counselor Grossman,
No.
Counselor Humphrey,
No.
Counselor Kalis,
No.
Counselor Kelly,
No.
Counselor Krinsman,
No.
Counselor Leary,
No.
Counselor Lipoff,
No.
Counselor Lobovitz,
No.
Counselor Lucas,
Aye.
Counselor Maliki,
Aye.
Counselor Mickley,
No.
Counselor Oliver,
Aye.
Counselor Wright,
Aye.
President Laredo.
No.
Motion fails. 9 yeas, 15 nays.
Let's move on unless anyone has any further discussion on either of the two main items. Let's vote them. So we're going to vote the first one, which is simply to comply with state law. We're going to vote on that first. A yes or an aye vote is in favor of the docket item. A no or a nay vote is against it. Madam Clerk, call the roll, please.
Counselor Albright,
Aye.
Counselor Baker,
Aye.
Counselor Bixby,
Aye.
Counselor Block,
Aye.
Counselor Danberg,
Aye.
Counselor Downs.
Aye.
Thank you. Counselor Farrell,
Aye.
Counselor Gentile,
Aye.
Counselor Getz, Counselor Greenberg,
Aye.
Counselor Grossman,
Aye.
Counselor Humphrey,
Aye.
Counselor Kalis,
Aye.
Counselor Kelly,
Aye.
Counselor Krinsman,
Aye.
Counselor Leary,
Aye.
Counselor Lipoff,
Aye.
Counselor Lobovitz,
Aye.
Counselor Lucas,
Aye.
Counselor Maliki,
Aye.
Counselor Mickley,
Aye.
Counselor Oliver,
Aye.
Counselor Wright,
Aye.
President Laredo.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously 24-0.
All right, we're moving on to the second item. This is the one which is more discretionary, not necessarily in compliance with state law. A yes or an aye vote is in favor of the proposed ordinance as it came out of committee. A no or a nay vote is against that. Please call the roll.
Counselor Albright,
Aye.
Counselor Baker,
No.
Counselor Bixby,
Aye.
Counselor Block,
Aye.
Counselor Danberg,
Aye.
Counselor Downs,
Aye.
Counselor Farrell,
No.
Counselor Gentile,
No.
Counselor Getz,
Aye.
Counselor Greenberg,
Aye.
Counselor Grossman,
Aye.
Counselor Humphrey,
Aye.
Counselor Kalis,
Aye.
Counselor Kelly,
Aye.
Counselor Krinsman,
Aye.
Counselor Leary,
Aye.
Counselor Lipoff,
Aye.
Counselor Lobovitz,
Aye.
Counselor Lucas,
No.
Counselor Maliki,
No.
Counselor Mickley,
Aye.
Counselor Oliver,
Nope.
Counselor Wright,
Aye.
President Laredo.
Aye.
Motion carries 18 yeas, 6 nays.
Right, thank you. We are now on to the third of our four items on second call. I'm going to recognize the chair of the Land Use Committee. This is the Northland item, although I'm sure she'll provide a little more detail than just that summary. Go ahead, please.
Well, I could go back to 2018, but I'm really just going to go back to 2025 because the amendment, the special permit request is just an amendment. It's item number 7-25 at 55 Tower Road and 400 Main Street, Newton Upper Falls. The Land Use Committee met 3 times in 2025 on this request. We met on February 4th, March 25th, and most recently on April 15th on this item to amend a previous special permit number 426-18. That's when this all started. It actually started before 2018. The request is based generally on a proposed change and reduction of use through the conversion of the mill building, which eliminates commercial and office space, eliminates 5 small buildings, adds residential units. Other changes include more open space, less overall traffic impact, 1 additional 3-bedroom affordable unit. Thank you, Councilor Greenberg. More surface parking to accommodate retail and restaurant customers, and a shuttle schedule with more limited hours than we saw before, hours of operation than previously permitted as a result of the reduction in program and the loss of office use. The project will be cash positive annually and contribute continue to provide mitigation payments, for example, approximately $6 million this calendar year. At the most recent April 15th meeting, the Land Use Committee heard from the petitioner, the Planning Department, the Economic Development Commission. We heard public comment. We discussed all the issues. We closed the public hearing. We went over the findings, supplemental findings, and conditions. It was noted that the City Council focuses specifically and directly on the amendment to the special permit, not a reopening of the original project that was permitted in early 2019. So we should keep that in mind tonight too, everyone. Numerous consultant reports covering traffic and transportation, market analysis, infrastructure, stormwater, urban design, tax revenue, and fiscal impact were referenced, along with independent professional peer reviews by consultants. It was acknowledged that these were thorough and compelling. After several hours of deliberation, this is at the recent April 15th meeting, changes were made such as increasing the TDM fee from $200,000 to $500,000. Thank you, President Laredo, with a maximum cap of $1 million being included in the council order. All committee members present contributed suggestions to specific areas to expand, edit, and refine, and I thank them all for their thoughtful and active involvement. Many other councilors joined us at these three meetings online and Zoom and in the chamber and contributed to the conversation too. A motion was made to accept the request to amend the special permit, and it passed unanimously, which stunned many of us, in a 7-0 vote, unanimous for all present, and with one absence. I ask the full council tonight to support that motion by voting in the affirmative. It was an extremely—
Councilor Kelly, I think that's saved for advocacy rather than report.
Oh, I can't just add my opinion. I will say this later then. Thank you.
For advocacy.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Do I have anybody who wishes to be heard? Councilor Block.
Thank you, Mr. President. My fellow city councilors and members of the public, the original Northland plan approved in 2019 authorized 193,000 square feet of office space in the Saco Petit Mill Building, 13 more buildings containing 800 residential units, 115,000 square feet of retail and restaurant space, 1,350 parking stalls, nearly all underground, a shuttle system to the Newton Highlands T-stop, a splash park, millions of dollars in fees, and millions more for traffic mitigation and community improvements. This is the largest proposed development in Newton in living memory, perhaps ever. Due to a significant decline in demand for office space, Northland proposes to change their approved plan by eliminating office space, using the mill building for 100 residential units, eliminating 5 residential buildings, 300 parking spaces, reducing the number of residential units in the remaining buildings by a net of 78, so that a total of 822 residential units will be built. The frequency of the shuttle is reduced, but the splash park and the millions of dollars in fees and community improvements remain. When I first learned the details of the revised plan, I had 3 major questions I wanted answered. 1, does a market analysis of office space tell us when the demand might return? I was hoping that a specialist in developing historic buildings could propose a plan that Northland could at least explore. 2, what would be the fiscal impact of the new plan compared to the old one? The fiscal impact of the original plan had a positive impact between 1.9 million and 0.7 million annually. With the elimination of the office space, I expected this number to decrease, but I wondered by how much. 3, what is the impact on traffic? With the elimination of office space, I expected the total vehicular trips to decline. Nonetheless, I wondered how congested would Needham Street be under the revised plan. I raised these questions in committee, and I wrote memos to the Planning Department on February 19, April 8, and April 14. In response to these questions, Northland retained Landwise to conduct a market study of the office space in the Boston suburban market. The planning department retained Camoin as the independent peer reviewer. Both of these reports concluded that the market for office space was extremely competitive and that eliminating the office space from Northland's plan made sense. The conclusions were a disappointment, but they were consistent with general information regarding the office space market. The same two firms were asked to analyze the fiscal impact of the plan. Landwise concluded that Newton would receive 1.8 million annually.
Counselor Block, you're at the end of your time. Do you need more time?
I need about 4 more minutes.
All right, I'm going to suggest motion to give Counselor Block an additional 5 minutes so he does not come back and ask us for more time after that. All in favor, please say aye. Aye, opposed, the ayes have it. Go ahead, please.
Landwise concluded that Newton would receive 1.8 million annually once the development was completed. This is almost as much as the high estimate that Figueres made in 2019, even though commercial space has been eliminated and the number of school children is projected to be 152 instead of 120. I hope the independent reviewer would shed some light on this as RKG did in 2019. I regret to say that Camoin spent less than 1 page of its report on this question and limited its analysis to the mill building. By comparing the office space tax revenue with the revenue generated by 100 units, Camoin concludes that the city would lose, quote, about $169,000 per year, unquote. But what about the 5 eliminated buildings and the reduction of 78 residential units? Why wasn't this presented to us? I want to acknowledge that Jennifer Cara wrote me this afternoon saying that the reduction in the project size would reduce tax revenues by about $600,000. But she maintained that the project would nonetheless yield about 1.8 million annually to the city. This conclusion does not seem logical to me. Further work by a peer reviewer, preferably a firm other than Camoin, is, in my opinion, needed. Finally, we come to the question of traffic. VHB prepared its usual voluminous and professional report. Reviewing VHB's work and understanding its implications takes time. As is customary, planning hired an independent reviewer, Beta, to review VHB's work. Unfortunately, Beta did not zero in on the gridlock that will develop at the Needham and Oak Street intersection and propose ways in which the development should be modified to avoid the F level of service that VHB predicts will happen. Perhaps the main reason Beta failed to do this is that the law department has instructed all of us to consider only the amendments to the original plan, as Chair Kelly repeated this evening. I beg to differ with this advice. The new plan is radically different from the original. Many conditions have changed since 2019, not the least is the construction of a 410 40B residential complex on Charlemont Street. I believe that we must consider the plan in its entirety. The fact that it is being presented to us as an amendment to a previously approved plan does not alter how large a change this is. Viewed from this perspective, I am concerned that the traffic volume on Needham Street will rise to unacceptable levels. This is not in Newton's interest, nor is it in Northland's interest. I believe that an independent peer reviewer should provide us with some options that would bring the congestion on Needham Street down to acceptable levels. These sorts of issues could have been thrashed out in the Neighborhood Liaison Committee that was set up by the special permit. That's how similar issues to these are being worked out for Riverside. The issues could have been worked out in the Land Use Committee. Unfortunately, these questions remain unresolved. It is my hope that by chartering this item, the planning department can work with Northland and the peer reviewers to bring us a better plan.
Are you chartering the item, Counselor Block?
Chartering the item.
All right,
Mr.
the item is chartered. We will take it up at our next regularly scheduled meeting, beginning of May. We have one more item this evening to take up. It comes out of zoning and planning. I'm going to recognize the vice chair, who also put this on second call. So, Mr. Vice Chair, why don't you give your report, make it clear that you're finished with your report, then you can offer your commentary.
Fair enough. Thank you, Mr. President. So we are talking about the appointment of Andrew Capoletti to the Economic Development Commission, sorry. The item was heard in SAP on the 14th. It was approved 5-1. I was the sole no vote, and I believe it was Counselor Wright who was the sole abstention. There was one person that was absent. That's the full
You want to
report.
speak on the merits now?
Yeah, and again, my apologies. I didn't expect us to be here at 9:43 this evening. However, I do feel that it was important for me to just stand up and explain why I do not support this individual being appointed to the Economic Development Commission. And I think it's important that I just start with the simple fact that this is someone who should be able to advise this body, the city council, on how it is that the city can improve our economic development, can actually increase our economic footprint, right? He should, right, be able to help us understand not only how to achieve, revenue growth in the city, but he should be able to work with his entire commission in order to do so. When we started to ask questions about his ideas, his thoughts, his approaches, how he would help the city increase, very specifically, our commercial space, meaning both office space and retail, he offered up only one real answer to that question, and it was very simply, in a city that is something close to 85-90% residential already, his response was the only pathway for Newton to generate commercial success would be to build dramatically more housing. When we asked him if there were opportunities that he had in mind to replicate instances where we had companies coming into the city of Newton to take over open commercial space, he said that he did not. He did not have any ideas or thoughts as to how the city could fill existing, already built, commercial space. Remember, this is somebody who's supposed to be able to advise this group on these topics. And at the end, I'm just really concerned about his ability to step out of his day job as a developer and into the role of someone that's going to be advising this body as to how we can solve what the mayor just tonight said was one of our biggest challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Oliver. Counselor Lipoff.
One of the things that the governor says, and the biggest challenge we have is housing, but we don't need to get into that tonight. Mr. Capillotti is from Ward 8. Stephen and I and David know who he is because a few weeks ago he reached out to us and asked when his street was going to be paved. And we were happy to tell him it was 2026, which is great when it's like just a few years away. I've never met the man. That's our only touch with him. But I would say if this was the ZBA, if this was a committee that voted, that had some true power, this committee is more of advisory. I think that when a citizen steps up and raises their hand and says, I am willing for no pay to work on behalf of this city on a commission like this, and you have an MBA from Michigan State, and you are a principal in a major real estate development company, I think that's incredible value. And I'm getting a little concerned. This is the second one in the past few months, that if we continue to do this and cherry pick the people that raise their hand, nobody's going to want to come and do this anymore. And the mayor will tell you, and the president of the council will tell you how hard it is sometimes to find people to serve. So if some may not have liked his answers, it seems like the majority of the committee did. I think that this gentleman brings vast knowledge if you read his resume on his website, and I would wholeheartedly vote for him and thank him for raising his hand.
Thank you, Counselor Lipoff. Counselor Farrell, then Albright.
Thank you, Chair. I do not know Mr. Capilotti, although he lives just a few blocks from my home. I do understand he was looking for support to get his road redone, and I want to thank Councilor Lipoff for responding to that. I do appreciate that individuals step up and want to participate and help us. I have to tell you, frankly, when I asked him 3 times what his vision was for economic development in Newton, as we heard earlier from the Council from Ward 1, his answer was about increasing residential work. He is an advisory capacity. I want somebody who will, in fact, start thinking outside the box about what we need to do to increase the income for the city. And it won't happen, I believe, as Councilor Lucas has mentioned to us and his concern several times. We need to expand commercial development. And however outrageous his advice may be, I hope it's about commercial development and not about residential. So I was very disappointed and will not be voting for his nomination. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Farrell, Counselor Albright, and then Counselor Danberg.
I just wanted to point out to colleagues, in case you don't know, I think it's called Arsenal Yards in Watertown, which is a totally unbelievable combination of housing and commercial properties, which reawakened that part of Watertown and has given Watertown a huge shot in the arm. And now, as the mayor's chart showed us, Watertown is now 3rd in new growth. And it's because of Arsenal Yards and the company that this man works for. So he knows how to do housing and commercial development. And he can advise us how to do it. And the mayor tonight said that one of the 9 levers she talked about tonight was to increase housing and commercial development. And this man knows how to do it, and he's done it for Watertown. And that's the kind of advice and help that we need as a board. He will be able to tell us how can the city council make our processes work better to bring in new housing and new commercial development. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Albright. Counselor Danberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank Councilor Lipoff and Councilor Albright for their comments. And I agree full-heartedly with both of them. As far as a person's answer to how they would increase commercial space, occupation of commercial space, or increase the number of square footage of commercial at this point, it reminds me of the years 2007, 8, and 9, when we had the housing crisis whereby no bank would finance any housing. And if you remember, when we were building, when the city was working on getting Chestnut Hill Plaza built, there were supposed to be 2 very tall, I think 14-story residential properties on that parcel of land. And we had to back off from that. The developer backed off from it because they couldn't get it financed. And that's the case of what's going on in commercial development right now. We've got, what is it, 25 or 30% of commercial space that is unoccupied. That's not going to continue forever. I'm sorry about this microphone. We've lost the little thing that goes over here. It keeps flying off. So someday commercial space will be occupied again, but not now. It's the banks will not finance it. Investors will not finance it. What we're facing, if we hold the developers' feet to the fire and say, no, we're going to require them to keep commercial space in this development, is that they could walk away from this and we could wind up with nothing there. We have to look at the economic times and the people who step up to the plate and say, answer questions, and we get answers that we don't like to hear. In this man's case, since he has the background that he has, I have to say he's looking
Councilor Danbrook, you're out of time.
15 seconds.
All right, all in favor
He's
of 15
speaking-
seconds to Councilor Danbrook, please say aye. Aye, go
He's
ahead.
speaking realistically about the times. So I am going to wholeheartedly approve of this man for this committee. I think that we are very lucky to have him.
Thank you, Councilor Danbrook. Councilor Farrell, recognize you again.
Thank you, Chair.
You know, folks, we're all entitled to speak. If you have something new to say, that will be welcome. If you're going to just repeat something, just get up and say, I agree with whomever spoke before. Councilor Farrell, Kalis, Mickley, Lucas, Maliki.
Does this all cut into my time, Chair?
This did not cut into
Thank
your
you.
time one
No.
second. This is my.
Seriously, I would have been happy to listen to Mr. Capola talk about what he had done in Arsenal, but he didn't even mention that. I am not talking about requiring developers to do things. I am talking about having people come into the city who will work with developers imaginatively and say, how do we fill these storefronts? I don't know how they do it, but that's what his business is. And I wish that he had said, it's going to be a really challenge for us, but here's some crazy ideas that I have. That would have been exciting to listen to somebody say. When somebody says the only thing to do is increase residential property, that's not inspiring to me. When I see all of those storefronts that are closed, I want somebody to say to me, I've got some crazy ideas and I want to work with developers, not require them to do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Farrell. All right, Councilor Kalis, then Lucas, then Mickley, then Maliki.
I agree with Councilor Danberg. The only other thing I'm going to add is that he's a developer. Oftentimes we have questions about pro formas, financials. He'll be able to answer some of those for us. So I think it's valuable insights.
Short and to the point. Thank you, Vice President Kalis. Next, I have Councilor Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do, to Councilor Albright, I do know Arsenal Yards. I've been there a few times, but I really miss the Arsenal Mall. I remember when it was Ann and Hope there. I had lots of fun there with my family. On the second floor, they had the food court and all that stuff. Okay, fine. Yeah, I'm also going to vote no on this appointment to go in line with what Councilor Oliver and Councilor Farrell had to say. I won't repeat what they said, but to answer Councilor Farrell's question or query, I do have some crazy ideas to make storefronts occupied that are vacant right now. But that's a conversation for another day, but I will be voting no. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Lucas. Councilor Mickley and then Councilor Maliki.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. To me, the core issue is a conflict of interest with a potential negotiating counterparty, especially with large scale developers. There's a lot at stake for the city when they seek a special permit, and the benefits and opportunities we can secure for residents through things like mitigation funds. He's I have no idea who he is as a person, but he's a principal on a large scale development firm that's currently approved to build a 300 unit building in Ward 2. And having this is not the place for discussion whether that's a good project or bad project, but I think it undermines the integrity of the negotiation process to have a negotiating counterparty also serve as an advisor to us. So I think they're two separate roles. And tying it back to the ADU conversation, I do think this is a case where we might actually want to have people that are building ADUs on this commission, people building smaller scale more moderate type of housing so we can make sure their voices are heard, because principals at large scale developers don't have an issue with having their opinions heard through various means with the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Maliki.
Thank you. So Councilor Oliver said a lot of what I felt. I listened to that meeting at which he was interviewed. Equally disappointed with Councilor Farrell about the answer to the question about what can we do to improve and increase commercial tax revenue. I think that I have trouble figuring out what I think from listening to the mayor and Maureen Lemieux tonight, we kind of know the sort of grim fiscal situation we're facing. And I think it really emphasizes the importance of doing all we can to retain and increase commercial, even if it means we're not going to get the housing that people keep writing us letters about. I think what I would like to see in a new member of the Economic Development Commission is the kind of person who does have ideas, who could say, look at the Saco Petty buildings and give us and Northland, since they don't seem to have any ideas, what could they do to fill up the building in the absence of a thriving office space market? One other question that Mr. Cappelletti answered, or one of his answers, he mentioned that, Watertown's doing great because they got in early on biotech before biotech collapsed. So they've got some biotech. Somebody who could tell us what to get in early to not be left in that position in the future. So I'll be voting no as well.
Thank you. Councilor Albright, I think you got about a minute or so left.
I don't think I need more than that. I had
Go ahead.
forgotten to say that I had spoken with the chamber president about this particular, and he told me that he said that the president of the chamber, if you ask how to fill commercial space, he says build more housing. And the reasons for that are for the villages, you have feet on the street that will go to the village shops. And if you had more affordable housing, businesses would be willing to relocate in Newton because there'd be places for their workers to be. So I think that's the role that he wanted me to express that housing plays in commercial development. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to be heard on the item? All right, seeing none, we're going to take it up for a vote. Let's be very clear what we're voting on. You vote yes or aye, you're voting in favor of the appointment. If you're voting no or nay, you're voting against the appointment. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilor Albright.
Aye.
Councilor Baker. Councilor Baker.
Councilor Baker?
Aye, sorry, technical problems.
Thank you. Councilor Bixby.
Aye.
Councilor Block.
No.
Councilor Danberg.
Aye.
Councilor Downs. Aye. Councilor Farrell.
No.
Councilor Gentile.
Aye.
Councilor Getz.
Aye.
Councilor Greenberg.
Aye.
Councilor Grossman.
Aye.
Councilor Humphrey.
Aye.
Councilor Kalis.
Aye.
Councilor Kelly.
Aye.
Councilor Krinsman.
Aye.
Councilor Leary.
Aye.
Councilor Lipoff.
Aye.
Councilor Labovitz.
No.
Councilor Lucas.
No.
Councilor Maliki.
No.
Councilor Mickley.
No.
Councilor Oliver.
No.
Councilor Wright.
No.
President Laredo.
Aye.
Motion carries 16 yeas, 8 nays.
Hey, Councilor Lipoff, do we have a motion to adjourn? All right, folks, two things, please, before you go. Again, let's thank Ms. Moore for her last evening clerking for the full council.
Yes, indeed.
And Ms. Moore reminded me that our budget books are outside, so everyone has a lot of homework to do. Please pick up your materials.
Recording stopped.
Okay. Well, but if you had, if you only spoke so that you could be right on the back, that's why you spoke, what, 2, 3 times?